So welcome to part 2 of chapter 2 in Of Mice and Men. Yesterday we left off at question 13. Why is George making a plan with Lenny? And our answer was he's making a plan for them to meet in case something bad happens. So we're going to be picking up from there. Remember, you can pause this video at any time so you can follow along and actively learn, and then pause it to answer the questions. A brake screeched outside. A call came. "Stable Buck. Oh, Stable Buck," George said. "Say it over to yourself, Lenny, so you won't forget it." Both men glanced up, for the rectangle of sunshine in the doorway was cut off. A girl was standing there looking in. She had full, rouged lips and wide-spaced eyes, heavily made up. Her fingernails were red. Her hair hung in little rolled clusters like sausages. She wore a cotton house dress and red mules, on the insteps of which were little bouquets of red ostrich feathers. "I'm looking for Curly," she said. Her voice had a nasal, brittle quality. George looked away from her and then back. "He was in here a minute ago, but he went." "Oh." She put her hands behind her back and leaned against the door frame so that her body was thrown forward. "You're the new fellas that just come, ain't ya?" "Yeah." Lenny's eyes moved down over her body, and though she did not seem to be looking at Lenny, she bridled a little. She looked at her fingernails. "Sometimes Curly's in here," she explained. George said brusquely, "Well, he ain't now." "If he ain't, I guess I better to look someplace else," she said playfully. Lenny watched her, fascinated. George said, "If I see him, I'll pass the word you was looking for him." She smiled archly and twirled her body. "Nobody can blame a person for lookin'," she said. There were footsteps behind her going by. She turned her head. "Hi, Slim," she said. Slim's voice came through the door. "Hi, good lookin'." "I'm trying to find Curly, Slim." "We ain't trying very hard. I seen him going in your house." She was suddenly apprehensive. "Bye, boys," she called into the bunkhouse, and she hurried away. George looked around at Lenny. "Jesus, what a tramp," he said. "So that's what Curly picks for a wife." "She's purty," said Lenny defensively. "Yeah, and she's sure hiding it. Curly got his work ahead of him. Bet she'd clear out for $20. So now you have a question 14, and it says, how can you best describe Curly's wife? And you have your options there. Think about what we've just learned about her. We just met her, and see if you can select the correct answer. Lenny still stared at the doorway where she had been. Gosh, she was purty. He smiled admiringly. George looked quickly down at him, and then he took him by an ear and shook him. "Listen to me, you crazy bastard," he said fiercely. "Don't you even take a look at that bitch. I don't care what she says and what she does. I seen 'em poisoned before, but I never seen no piece of jailbait worse than her. You leave her be." Lenny tried to disengage his ear. "I never done nothing, George." "No, you never. But when she was standing in the doorway showing her legs, you wasn't looking the other way, neither." "I never meant no harm, George. Honest, I never." "Well, you keep away from her, 'cause she's a rat trap if I ever seen one. You let Curly take the rap. He let himself in for it." "Glove full of Vaseline," George said disgustedly. "And I bet he's eating raw eggs and right into the patent medicine houses." Lenny cried out suddenly. "I don't like this place, George. This ain't no good place. I want to get out of here." "We got to keep it till we get a steak. We can't help it, Lenny. We'll get out just as soon as we can. I don't like it no better than you do." He went back to the table and set out a new solitaire hand. "No, I don't like it," he said. "For 2 bits I'd shove out of here. If we can get just a few dollars in the poke, we'll shove off and go up the American River and pan gold. We can make maybe a couple of dollars a day there, and we might hit a pocket." Lenny leaned eagerly toward him. "Let's go, George. Let's get out of here. It's mean here." "We gotta stay," George said shortly. "Shut up now. The guys will be coming in." From the washroom nearby came the sound of running water and rattling basins. George studied the cards. "Maybe we ought to wash up," he said. "We ain't done nothing to get dirty." A tall man stood in the doorway. He held a crushed Stetson hat under his arm while he combed his long, black, damp hair straight back. Like the others, he wore blue jeans and a short denim jacket. When he had finished combing his hair, he moved into the room, and he moved with a majesty only achieved by royalty and master craftsmen. He was a jerkline skinner, the prince of the ranch, capable of driving 10, 16, even 20 mules with a single line to the leaders. He was capable of killing a fly on the wheeler's butt with a bullwhip without touching the mule. There was a gravity in his manner and a quiet so profound that all talk stopped when he spoke. His authority was so great that his word was taken on any subject, be it politics or love. This was Slim, the jerkline Skinner. His hatchet face was ageless. He might have been 35 or 50. His ear heard more than was said to him, and his slow speech had overtones not of thought, but of understanding beyond thought. His hands, large and lean, were as delicate in their action as those of a temple dancer. So now you have another question to answer, question 15. It says, reread the description of Slim. How does the author want the reader to feel about Slim? So we've gotten some very positive comments about him. So you're going to want to look for an answer that has some positive ideas. He smoothed out his crushed hat, creased it in the middle, and put it on. He looked kindly at the two in the bunkhouse. It's brighter 'n a bitch outside, he said gently. Can't hardly see nothing in here. You the new guys? Just come, said George. You gonna buck barley? That's what the boss says. Slim sat down on a box across the table from George. He studied the solitaire hand that was upside down to him. Hope you get on my team, he said. His voice was very gentle. I got a pair of punks on my team that don't know a barley bag from a blue ball. You guys ever bucked any barley? Hell yes, said George. I ain't nothing to scream about, but that big bastard there can put up more grain alone than most pears can. Lenny, who had been following the conversation back and forth with his eyes, smiled complacently at the compliment. Slim looked approvingly at George for having given the compliment. He leaned over the table and snapped the corner of a loose card. You guys travel around together? His tone was friendly. It invited confidence without demanding it. Sure, said George. We kind of look after each other. He indicated Lenny with his thumb. He ain't bright. Hell of a good worker, though. Hell of a nice fella. But he ain't bright. I've knew him for a long time. Slim looked through George and beyond him. Ain't many guys travel around together, he mused. I don't know why. Maybe everybody in the whole damn world is scared of each other. So now you have a poll question. Remember, those are just your opinion. And it says, do you think Slim's quote, maybe everybody in the whole damn world is scared of each other, is true? Are people scared of each other? And you're just going to select yes or no. It's a lot nicer to go around with a guy you know, said George. A powerful, big-stomached man came into the bunkhouse. His head still dripped water from the scrubbing and dousing. Hi, Slim, he said, and then stopped and stared at George and Lenny. These guys just come, said Slim, by way of introduction. Glad to meet you, the big man said. My name's Carlson. I'm George Milton. This here's Lenny Small. Glad to meet you, Carlson said again. He ain't very small. He chuckled softly at his joke. Ain't small at all, he repeated. Meant to ask you, Slim. How's your bitch? I seen she wasn't under your wagon this morning. She slang her pups last night, said Slim. 9 of 'em. I drowned 4 of 'em right off. She couldn't feed that many. You got 5 left, huh? Yeah, 5. I kept the biggest. What kind of dogs do you think they're going to be? I don't know, said Slim. Some kind of shepherds, I guess. That's the most kind I seen around here when she was in heat. Carlson went on. Got 5 pups, huh? You going to keep all of 'em? I don't know. Have to keep 'em a while so they can drink Lulu's milk. Carlson said thoughtfully, well, look-a-here, Slim. I've been thinking. That dog of Candy's is so goddamn old he can't hardly walk. Stinks like hell, too. Every time he comes into the bunkhouse, I can smell him for 2 or 3 days. Why don't you get Candy to shoot his old dog and give him one of the pups to raise up? I can smell that dog a mile away. Got no teeth, damn near blind, can't eat. Candy feeds him milk. He can't chew nothing else. So now you have another question here. Slim's dog just had puppies, so they're talking about the puppies of his dog Lulu. And it says, what does Carlson suggest they do with Candy's dog? And then you're going to select what you believe is the best answer. George had been staring intently at Slim. Suddenly, a triangle began to ring outside, slowly at first, and then faster and faster until the beat of it disappeared into one ringing sound. It stopped as suddenly as it had started. There she goes, said Carlson. Outside, there was a burst of voices as a group of men went by. Slim stood up slowly and with dignity. You guys better come on while there's still something to eat. Won't be nothing left in a couple of minutes. Carlson stepped back to let Slim precede him, and then the two of them went out the door. Lenny was watching George excitedly. George rumpled his cards into a messy pile. Yeah, George said. I heard him, Lenny. I'll ask. A brown and white one, Lenny cried excitedly. Come on, let's get dinner. I don't know whether he got a brown and white one. Lenny didn't move from his bunk. You ask him right away, George, so he won't kill no more of them. So you have a question here, and it's what does Lenny want? And I'm going to give you the answer as a reminder of what happened in chapter 1. Remember, George told Lenny that he might get him a puppy because he wouldn't be able to accidentally kill it like he was with the mice that he was finding. So when he hears that Slim's dog has had puppies, he gets very, very excited. And that's what George is talking about, saying that he will ask. So Lenny wants one of the puppies here. Sure, come on now, get up on your feet. Lenny rolled off his bunk and stood up, and the two of them started for the door. Just as they reached it, Curly bounced in. You seen a girl around here? He demanded angrily. George said coldly, about half an hour ago, maybe. Well, what the hell was she doing? George stood still, watching the angry little man. He said insultingly, she said she was looking for you. Curly seemed really to see George for the first time. His eyes flashed over George, took in his height, measured his reach, looked at his trim middle. Well, which way'd she go? He demanded at last. I don't know, said George. I didn't watch her go. Curly scowled at him and turned, hurried out the door. George said, you know, Lenny, I'm scared I'm going to tangle with that bastard myself. I hate his guts. Jesus Christ. Come on, there won't be a damn thing left to eat. They went out the door. The sunshine lay in a thin line under the window. From a distance, there could be heard a rattle of dishes. After a moment, the ancient dog walked lamely in through the open door. He gazed about with mild, half-blind eyes. He sniffed and then lay down and put his head between his paws. Curly popped into the doorway again and stood looking into the room. The dog raised his head, but when Curly jerked out, the grizzled head sank to the floor again. So your last question for chapter 2 is several new characters were introduced in chapter 2. Which of these characters do you like the best? And then explain your answer with evidence from the story. Now be careful because we're not talking about George and Lenny here. We're talking about the new characters. So some of the characters that you could think about, we met Candy, the boss, Curly, who is the boss's son, Slim, Curly's wife, and Carlson. So I want you to tell me, which of these did you like? Which did you dislike? And then be sure to tell me why. When you finish, you have other things to work on today for class. But when you finish, make sure you hit submit, and then you can move to your next activity.